I want to get started with the presentation. Welcome to the voting in the 2020 election presentation. I'm really excited to be able to do this with you all. I'm Dr. Donahue from SVSU. I've been a professor in the political science department for many years. And this just seemed like the right thing to do. I'll tell you, I'll introduce the other folks in a second who I'm really grateful to have with me, but I want to give you a little sense of why I decided to put this together. And just like so many of you, I've been on social media. I've got friends that I keep connected with that way, and I really love to do that. But as I was going through the summer, I was just stunned at how much misinformation there was out there. And so I started to put this together. And I'll tell you after I introduce folks, what I was seeing, and then to make me want to put this together, and hopefully we can answer a lot of questions that you're going to have as we go through this process. So again, I'm Dr. Donahue, and I want to introduce Riley Hupfer. He's the director for the Center for Community Engagement at SVSU, and so he's the one who's going to be taking your questions via chat. We're also going to put a resources page there for you, a website link. It's going to have all kinds of good links for you about the resources you might want to look at for later on as you're getting ready to go through this process. We have TJ Lucero with us for Bay City Clerk, Kevin Machado, the Coachville Township Clerk, Jamie Upmore, Deputy Clerk of Coachville Township, Kyle Bostwick, Chief Deputy Saginaw County Clerk, and Ann Maneri, Midland County Clerk. So these are the folks who really are going to answer most of your questions. These are the experts. These are the people who are running our elections. And they know more about this than anybody does. And so it's so nice to be able to really ask them questions directly. So you get anything you ever wanted to know about what's going on in an election. These are your people to talk to. So it's super cool to get them all together here at once. So as I was saying, I put this together just because over the summer, I just was watching so much misinformation in my social media feed. People were posting just all kinds of questions about, like, they would post what were clearly applications for ballots, and they were afraid they were actually ballots. And so that's just a whole area right there of misinformation. And I understand why. We take voting for granted. It's been so smooth in our history, thanks to these folks who run our elections, that we usually really don't even have to think about it. I mean, most of us, even myself, as someone who's more in this field, we show up on November 3rd and everything's done for us. And that's because they have all these folks who do all this work. And so we don't have to think about it. And that's the way it should be. That's fantastic and wonderful. But unfortunately, this election, we really do. We need to know more this election. And I think that the pandemic in particular has changed that. I mean, just the fact that we have to do this a little bit differently than we have sometimes in the past. So that in itself is just worth having this presentation for. But we're also in a more contentious political environment than we've ever been through in my lifetime. And so there's a lot of misinformation swirling around out there, and a lot more questions and the people want some answers to, understandably. And that's a good thing. We can use this historic moment to learn more about how this process works, to really kind of look behind the scenes and talk to the folks who are going to make it all happen, and understand that it's going to work much better, I think, than many people are concerned. So knowing more about democracy makes it work better. So that's what we're gonna do first, and I want to talk first about some important dates that we have for you. Now is a good time. Request your absentee ballot online. Is a good time to submit that now. Submit a paper application now. We've got resources for you to do that in that link that we're going to provide at the center. I want to ask the clerks, when does in-person voting happen at your clerk's office? I'd like an answer from each of the clerks. When does that start?
So I'll go first, if that's okay. For us, ballots are available as long as they've been delivered by the county clerk and vendor on time. The 23rd, I believe, is our first day. It is in the election language in our guidebook that we follow that they're supposed to be taken in the order requested. So we are supposed to get all of our absentees out first rather than walk-ins, but this year we've kind of been making an exception to that rule. If we have a person in office right then, we're doing our best to accommodate it. However, the volume that we have sometimes makes that a little difficult, especially with the amount of time before an election. There's not a huge need to come right in that first day that they're available when we're trying to handle almost 6,000 absentees right now for my office.
Okay, Saginaw, Kyle.
So in Saginaw County, we'll have ballots ready for voters before the 24th of September, which they're required to be available on that date. We currently have ballots have been printed, and they are here in the county clerk's office, and we're in the process of doing testing. They'll be released to the local clerks in the next day or two, and they'll do the testing on their end, and they'll be available to voters very soon.
Okay, Kevin, Coachville.
Exactly what Kyle said. So we're just waiting on getting them from them. And then once we have them, people, if they want to come in and vote in person, they can. But as Terry said, we'll get the ones out that we have the applications for first. But if somebody does come in, we'll accommodate them.
Okay, and then Ann, Midland.
So just so everyone understands, the county clerk's office does not actually issue absentee ballots. Absentee ballots are issued by the city clerks and by the local township clerks. However, we do receive them originally from the printer, which ours will be in our office tomorrow by 9:15, and they'll be distributed out to our locals by Wednesday. So people can, I mean, if you haven't already, you can start requesting an absentee ballot, but the clerks will start mailing them on Wednesday.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, one of the things that we wanted to stress for you when you start doing your mail-in ballot stuff, you want to do that super early, and we'll come back to that when we talk about postal delays. But the recommendation is, as soon as you get them, if you want to mail them in, you should mail them in. October 31st, voters may submit written requests to spoil their absentee ballot and receive new ballot by mail. So that's your last day. If you think that you did something wrong on your ballot, that's called spoiling your ballot, so you can request it that day. You can still do that on November 2nd. You can submit a written request in person to spoil your ballot. Again, you made a mistake, you want to turn in a new ballot, you can do it that day, and you can do that up to 4 p.m. on November 3rd. Emergency absentee voting for a November general election is possible on that day. So those are some of the big dates. We're going to have those for you. Of course, November 3rd is election day. Polls are going to open early, so you can certainly always vote in person. Okay, the difference between an application to vote by mail and an actual ballot. TJ, if you could speak to this.
Yeah, and we're seeing a lot of confusion on this when we did our mass mailing for the absentee applications. The application is really just that. You are requesting in writing, acknowledging who you are, that you're a U.S. citizen, and signing that form stating that you want a ballot. Much like you would if you go to vote in person, you're gonna have to sign an application in person. So the application is just your request, our official record, that you wanted that ballot. The ballot is actually where you're gonna vote for any candidate listed on there. Do you want me to continue, Jesse?
No, that's good. Anybody want to add anything, any other confusion that you're seeing out there? So when your office gets an application, what do you do?
So as soon as we receive that application, we're immediately doing signature verification, just because we want that end of the process to be out of the way as soon as possible. So if there is any discrepancy, we can go ahead and try to make contact with that voter. We also started with this election, anybody that provides us with an email, you can get your up-to-date information at michigan.gov/vote, whether your application has been sent, received, and then same thing with your ballot. But we started doing an email notification process on our own. We're taking the list every day from the qualified voter file, and sending anybody that provided an email address notification that your application was received. It's all good to go. So as soon as we have a ballot, it'll be mailed.
All right, so let me ask you a question. What happens if there, what happens, so you're gonna reach out to people if their signature doesn't match. So can you give people some examples like, I know my signature's gotten really bad.
Yep. And it happens. And a lot of the times we can tell that it's either age, because when we were all 18 and first registered to vote, we had this beautiful signature. And then over time, we realized how many times we have to sign our name. So that changes significantly. A lot of times that driver's license file is updated, but every now and then it is not. So we try to reach out to that voter. If at all possible, we really want them to come in person and rectify that. We can upload that new signature, so we're looking at it. Elections is the one time that you want your signature to stay pretty much the same, just so that you're not interrupted every time that this process comes around, that you're good to go. We have worked with several jurisdictions. A lot of our college kids, especially, their signatures change a lot from when they're 18. Now they're 20-ish, and it just happens. So local clerks will help us, if they can appear to their local clerk and everybody's comfortable with that process, they don't have to come all the way back to Bay City or wherever they're from. And we've collaborated that way. So we try our best. And then same thing with our elderly voters. They are homebound. There's no way for them to come in. You can tell the same markers are there, but it's just a health issue at hand. So we try to touch base, make sure that they are, they are who they say they are, and that they did sign the application, and we try to make the best of the situation as possible.
Fantastic. Okay. So Kevin, sometimes voters might receive more than one ballot application. Why does that happen? And what are they looking for there?
Well, you have a lot of special interest groups that send out their own AVs. We've seen them from the UAW, the Republican Party. There's a special interest group from Lansing that just sent out for the November to all the people that were not on the permanent list. So they're all valid. And sometimes if we receive two of the same person, we'll either keep them together or put them in a separate file just to hold on to them. So they generally have all the same information they're asking for, and they may look a little bit different, but the information is usually typically in the same order. So they take usually what the state has and kind of copy that and critique it just a little bit.
Right. And let's just be clear, they're not behaving fraudulently by doing that. They're just trying to encourage people to vote, right?
Yep. Just
trying to get you and make the process easier for you by sending you an application. There's nothing wrong with that at all, right?
No, not at all. Nope.
Okay. Okay, Kyle, why is it that some voters might receive someone else's ballot sent to them?
This is a very rare instance that somebody else would receive a ballot that is not their own ballot. So what we're hearing is a lot of confusion that people are receiving those applications in other people's names, and they're saying, "Oh, I got these applications," but they're saying, "I got these ballots," and it's not the case. They've just got an application for a ballot. So once you fill out that application and you turn it in, then we're going to verify the signature on that application, and then we'll work your ballot will be issued to you. And so there's a few instances where maybe somebody who used to live in your apartment or you recently sold your house, that you did that transaction after you turned in that application, and then you moved during that short period of time, the ballot might be sent to that old address. But usually we're pretty quick at updating those records, so you shouldn't be receiving somebody else's ballot. Somebody might also pass away, and you might receive a ballot for that person that passes away, but most likely that is also going to be caught in the updated records that we get from our death system. And so if you receive somebody's ballot in Michigan, you're most likely going to be receiving a ballot of somebody that you're associated with, somebody you either bought a home from, or somebody who lived in your apartment, or it's for a family member or somebody that you were close to that passed away.
Perfect. And what happens if you do? What should you do if you accidentally receive somebody else's ballot? What would you like people to do?
Contact the clerk's office. and let them know and return it to the clerk's office is the best idea. That way the clerk is aware that that ballot didn't get where it needed to be, and they can go another step farther and try to locate the individual who actually requested the ballot. But then the clerk also has that ballot back in their hand so that they can dispose of it properly, they can spoil it, and they can record that with their information for election day for the Board of Canvassers. So it is important for you to follow through and get it back to the clerk.
Okay, terrific.
You should never try voting a ballot that is issued to somebody else. That is illegal.
Yes, it's a 93-day misdemeanor, and it's like $1,000 fine. So yeah, please don't do that.
Thank you. Yeah, so that's one of the questions next is, why should you not worry if someone else accidentally received a ballot meant for you, TJ? I mean, how are you going to verify a ballot coming from a particular person?
So our biggest way to verify that is the signature verification. There's a lot of misunderstanding out there. We have folks that, well, we've been married for 50 years. I sign this stuff all the time. Not when it comes to elections. That just can't happen. As they stated, that is a felony. And we have lots to power of attorney does not adhere when it comes to election materials. So you cannot sign on their behalf as long as they make a mark. So we have lots of folks that are either legally blind or just can't hold that pen to create a signature. We've had several of them that they just make an X, but as long as it's that voter making the attempt, that's the most important part. You can certainly fill out their certificate on the envelope that you assisted them with voting and that you're returning it for them, and then we process that. But you absolutely, that signature verification is our biggest challenge, and we immediately start notifying those voters in any way we can. It's why it's very important. We have some folks that are reluctant to give us our phone number or their phone number and email address on those applications, but we don't sell those in any way. We don't give them out to anybody. It's just for our office to be able to contact you immediately if there's a problem receiving in your ballot or your application. So that's the biggest thing that we need you to do is make your own attempt. You can't sign for your husband, wife, son, daughter, cousin, anything else. It has to be the voter.
All right, perfect. All right, so Kevin, what happens if someone tries to vote twice? This is one of the big fears I'm hearing, that all these people out there going to try and vote twice. What happens in the state of Michigan if you try and do that? Do we lose Kevin? Anybody else want to speak to? I've got the link. That's okay.
Sorry, I had my phone on mute. So, no, if a person does vote twice, it's if they're committing a felony. There is checks and balances in the system to hopefully prevent that. There is probably some ways, as Kyle touched on before, that possibly could happen, but after there is on election night, there's a list for the absentee voters, and there's also a list for the actual voters. So they can't be on both lists. So those get checked by the Board of Canvassers. But yeah, it's in QVF, the qualified voter file is how it's tracked. So when a person votes AV or submits an application, and then on election day, it does come up in the electronic poll book. If they come in to vote, it'll say they either voted AV and their ballot was returned, so they cannot vote. So if they've already voted absentee and returned it. So.
Okay.
Just like to stress that if somebody does attempt to vote twice, we are going to find that out. And so there's extensive audits that happen after an election that compare all the people who cast ballots. And so we will cross-check those names, and we are going to eventually find out if somebody did vote twice. And here in Saginaw County, we fully intend to prosecute those individuals. They will be charged with felony offenses. And will become a part of their permanent record.
I do, if I can add to that real quick also, in August we saw a huge increase in surrendered absentee ballots. However, they may not have the ballot in hand when they go in person. So they do have to sign an affidavit while they're there, whether it never showed up in the mail or they lost it or destroyed it in some way, shape, or form. The election workers do have to call back to our office because, as Kevin said, they do have in their qualified voter file in their poll book that they were issued an absentee ballot, but it wasn't returned. So they do have to call and check to make sure we haven't received that yet. If they are surrendering it, we immediately reject that absentee ballot. So they don't have the option to go vote in person and then maybe pop that ballot in our drop box after that, where we hadn't received it in yet. So that's already rejected. So if you are calling, we do note that immediately so that if you do drop it off afterwards and we try to receive that ballot, it is rejected. It can't be accepted at that point.
Anybody else want to add anything? Are the
Yeah.
penalties? Yeah, go ahead.
So a lot of people are curious about this process and the security of it. And I think a lot of this stems around the president asking people to test the system by voting twice. And what the president is saying is that there should be, in the system, there should be a way to prevent people from voting twice. And Michigan system is set up that way. And so once you're issued an absentee ballot, your name in the qualified voter file is locked. And it has to be unlocked in order to issue you another ballot. And so you're going to have to sign an affidavit attesting that you have lost or your ballot has been destroyed. And so you would be committing a felony, or you would be personally lying if you were issued a second ballot. We're not just going to issue you a second ballot. It takes a step in the system to unlock your name in order to issue you a second ballot.
Okay, perfect. All right. Yeah, so that gets to my testing question, and people will be prosecuted. Thank you. I can imagine too that you guys just don't appreciate, forget about the felony part of it. You guys just don't appreciate having your work tested. Am I right? I mean, appreciate people. It's going to be hard enough to get through all of this additional work without people also throwing out some more work just to see if things will go wrong.
Yeah, it's going to slow down the process on election day. So here in Saginaw County, both in the inner city and out county, we're going to have very busy precincts on election day. And when somebody comes in and they try to test this system by trying to get a second ballot, it's going to take a lot of time of an election worker to work that process out, that scenario. And it's going to develop lines. And so you're really hurting your neighbors and your friends that are standing behind you waiting to vote by trying to test the system when you know yourself that you've already been issued an absentee ballot.
Right. So yeah, exactly. And okay, how to vote in person. I know that, I'm sorry for the folks for whom this is painfully obvious that we're going to go through this, but I know that we have new people too who are just joining us voting for the first time. So let's just we just wanted to cover a few things about voting in person. And this is, of course, mainly aimed at the folks who are just doing this for the first time. So Kevin, can you walk us through that a little bit? I really liked your points on this.
Okay. Don't feel nervous. I mean, everybody votes for the first time. Don't be afraid to make a mistake. Any mistake can be corrected. And don't be afraid to ask questions. The election workers are there to help you, and they will help you to make sure that your voting process goes as painless as possible. You need to bring your driver's license or another form of ID. In the other forms that are acceptable are a driver's license or personal ID card issued by another state, but that needs to be valid. It cannot be expired. A federal or state government issued photo identification, U.S. passport, military ID with photo, student ID with photo from a high school or accredited institution of higher learning, or a tribal card with photo. So that pretty much, and then you just, I believe there is going to be, Jesse will have some YouTube links. If you YouTube how to vote in the state of Michigan, there are some really very quick and videos that explain the process a little bit. So
yeah, we'll have the polling stations there as well for you, so you know where to go and links for that. Okay, so
And Jesse, real quick, for
yeah.
first-time voters, There cannot be any sort of campaign wear worn to the polls. No support of any candidate in either direction, no slogans that are associated with any candidate. I think that's hard. That's a hard line too for first timers because they're very excited to vote and very proud of who they support. And no matter what the race or candidate or proposal even is, there can't be anything.
And right, and can you campaign outside the polling station? Can you like set up
100 foot from any entrance to the building.
Okay. So down the road a ways, it's okay,
Yeah.
but not right around there. Okay. All right. One of the problems that is concerns, understandably, that some of my friends have too is, okay, what about the postal delays? Are there postal delays out there? I'm worried about mailing in my ballot. And so we have the short answer is yes. There are postal delays. And so I've been talking with these folks. I think putting your ballot in the ballot collection box outside the clerk's office is a really good idea. And that should be secure and a nice way. That's very convenient. You can go at any time to drop it off. So do that. But there are delays. And so you really need to, if you're going to go this route, mail that ballot in very, very early. And the other thing you can do is you can take part in the Postal Service's tracking system that they have. That's one possibility. But the overall recommendation is that we have, given the delays locally, is to use the drop boxes because that way you can be more sure. Now I want to ask the clerks too. These folks can bring in their mail-in ballot to you, correct? That's another option, to bring it to your office. So they don't even, if my friends even have worries about the drop box, they can walk it into you, correct? Now,
And just if I can touch on that too.
Yeah.
A clarification, we have a lot of folks that are putting stamps on their ballot in the drop box and it's not necessary.
Okay.
The return envelopes only take one stamp. I know there was a big go around with that in August that they needed to, where they absolutely wouldn't deliver them. But for Bay City standpoint, we only received 26 ballots late immediately after the election. Of those, I would say 18 of them, I believe, were postmarked the day before the election. And the rest of them, there was 2 or 3 that were postmarked the same day as the election. So obviously that's not the delays that everyone's talking about. And we did not see the same scale of delays that many jurisdictions were reporting. So, and then I think I received 3 today that folks signed September 12th. So it's just, there is a delay out there to speak of, but not as prominent as what it's being made out to be.
Anybody else want to add anything to that?
I agree with Terry. And I know someone that works for the post office locally and have had numerous conversations with them about the delays. And I mean, there is going to be delays, but not as much as you think. And he said that we're told that they are to push ballots through even if they don't have return postage on them. So it's there, and I know that in Saginaw and I think Bay City, anything that's local ballots for that area, they are processing them in-house, from what I've been told. So that also cuts down on the delay, where if it's going out of the area, then it gets sent out to either.
Oops, I think I lost sound.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, ours are not sent out here. They're kept in-house and she does them locally. And it's great, but at the same time, we mail them out and we think we have just a second to breathe and then someone walks it in the door the next day. So it's excellent service, but it's also immediately processing on this end. But yeah, they're not sent to, I don't know where it was. It is somewhere down south, but we don't send ours out for processing. They're done immediately here.
Kyle, did you want to add something?
Yes. So the ballots, for the majority of ballots in Saginaw County, they are sent to Pontiac, Michigan to be processed. And so they go to a mail sorting facility in Pontiac, and then they are supposed to work their way back here to Saginaw. And we did in August, we did see significant delays in the delivery of ballots and the return of ballots as well. It took a while for the ballots to get to the voters, and then it took a while for the ballots to, once the voter put them in the mail, for us to receive them. And so in our larger jurisdictions, we're sometimes talking, 20,000 ballots. And so that's a lot of mail to come and go. So the best way is to drop them, especially if you live in Saginaw Township or the city of Saginaw, to drop your ballot directly in the drop box at either Township Hall or at City Hall.
Okay, now also you guys, let me ask you, do you have extra hours on Saturdays, on the weekends that you all will be open for people to drop these ballots off?
Yeah, so it varies by county, but the Saturday before the election in Saginaw County, all clerk's offices will be open from 8 to 4 p.m. That's every township and city clerk's office in Saginaw County will be open from 8 to 4 p.m. for people to vote in person. You can come in and request an absentee ballot that day and vote it right in the clerk's office, or you could drop off your ballot if you already have it. I'll let the other clerks explain their hours.
We're the same here in Bay City, the Saturday before the election. And I do think, as Kyle said earlier, it's really important to point out, and I think probably Bay City, we have that issue more so here because we're in the same city as Bay County. But your ballot needs to be dropped off to your local township or city clerk. It cannot be returned to the county clerk. Similar with the applications, it really should go, and it helps delay the time. If you drop it to the county clerk, they'll certainly get it to us, but the voters really need to know it has to go to your local city or township clerk rather than the county.
Midland, what are our hours?
Well, actually, it varies. It depends on each jurisdiction. The city clerk's office is open from 8 to 4 on that Saturday, but some of my local townships have decided to split their day. They do part of the day on Saturday and part on Sunday. It just works better for the folks in their community. So it just depends. You should always call the clerk's office to find out what their hours are if you plan on going there, just so you're not surprised. Their hours are also listed if you go to the state voting site and look at your ballot. The clerk's information is listed there, and the hours are listed there as well. So that's another good resource for people to go look at and see if their clerk is what time the clerk is available. But I agree, make sure that your ballot is returned to the right jurisdiction. We ran ballots all day on election day because people would send them to the county clerk. They would drop them off to our office. And so we spent, the day on election day getting those ballots out to the jurisdictions where they need to go. So make sure you know where you got your ballot, and that's where it goes back to. Very important.
I do have one thing, and that with people that are going to use the mail system, you can go to michigan.gov/vote, and it does have, you can track your status of your absentee ballot. It texts when your application was received, when your absentee ballot was sent, and also when it's received by the clerk, and that is updated, I would say almost instantaneously, but if not, it would be overnight because it's linked to the qualified voter file that we use to check in and distribute the ballots.
All right, now the next step in this, is what happens to these ballots after they're placed in the tabulator at in-person polling places? I mean, the next set of fears that people have is, they got it there, they sent it away. What's going to happen to that ballot? And you're on.
So are we talking about an absentee ballot or a person actually going to the polls on election day?
I'm talking about in-person polling on election day, going to the polls on election day. Yeah.
Okay, so basically you go in there, you're issued your ballot, you go into your booth, you vote your ballot, you put it into the tabulator, and that's what everyone does all day long. At the close of polls at 8 p.m., the tabulator is closed down. The tapes are run, so every precinct has its list of candidates and the votes that they received. Some jurisdictions, like in Midland County, we actually modem the result. They modem the results into the county clerk's office, so that we have those results. As soon as the polls are closed, we start getting results on election night. So once that process happens, if there are any valid write-ins, then the election workers must look in the tabulator. Write-ins go into a separate bin in the tabulator, so they must go in, verify any write-in votes. At that point in time, then dependent upon the jurisdiction, the ballots are pulled out and put into actual bags that are sealed up, that are state certified bags that you can't, once they're sealed, you can't get in them. They're sealed up and then they are left sealed until the state releases the election, which is typically 30 to 35 days. They'll release the results. At that point in time, those bags can be opened. If there's no recounts in their jurisdictions, the bags can be opened and then put in canvas bags. And then again, depending upon the election, depends whether or not they have to be resealed. Some of them have to be resealed and maintained for up to 22 months if it's a federal election. So it just depends on what jurisdiction you're in. Some of them, seal up the machine itself. Other ones use ballot containers, but they're all state approved. Whatever they're put in, they're state approved. And then they just stay at the local clerk's office until they can be destroyed and recycled.
Okay. Anybody want to add anything to that? Okay. So then by mail, TJ, is that pretty much how it works by mail when they come into you, or how does that work?
Yeah, so the only difference is those ballots are actually, I think you had it on there, they're actually locked in my office until election day. And then they're delivered to the absentee counting board where they are opened and put through the tabulator by that counting board. But the process is the same. The retention is the same. Those are stored in a bag. They have to bring them back to me on election night where they're all locked again in my office until the canvas is approved and the results are cleared. And then we can transfer them into the storage like Ann was talking about. But yeah, the process is the same.
Okay, now, so these ballots are counted though in some room. So who's in the room? So I think.
So, yep. So the election inspectors on the counting board are in the room. Anybody is welcome to enter the counting board, but you're going to sign an affidavit. There's no electronics, so you can't, report out what you're seeing. But you are also sequestered there with that counting board until the close of polls, until they're done with their process. So you can't just kind of come and go and see. So if you plan on going and watching, that's absolutely okay, but you need to plan to stay there.
Okay, so that's the citizens planning to stay there. And then who else is in the room there?
There's nobody else. Myself is allowed to come and go because we're delivering ballots throughout the day. My deputy is allowed to come and go, but that's it. Aside from those election inspectors, there's nobody else in that room. Okay.
So who are the elections inspectors? Who are these folks?
Those are the folks that have signed up similar to working in the polls on election day. But we've appointed them to that absentee counting board, and they're appointed by myself and my deputy throughout the process of deciding who's going to work where for the election. And yeah, that's their job. They do pretty much the same thing. There's just not the voters around.
All right.
And in Midland County, it's actually a little bit different because our city actually has an AV counting board. So they do process, like TJ does, they process them at the city hall with a counting board. But my townships still process their absentees right at the polls. So when they have a break in actual walk-in voters, they will have the people who are the election workers, election inspectors who are working will actually process those AVs right along with everyone else coming into the polls on election day. So we actually have both processes here in Midland.
In Saginaw County, we have both processes too. So we have numerous AV counting boards in many of our jurisdictions. And then we still have the smaller municipalities that process their AVs ballots right in the precinct. In our larger municipalities here in Saginaw County, we often attract attorneys So in the city of Saginaw and Saginaw Township, you might often see representatives from the Michigan Republican Party and the Michigan Democratic Party will have attorneys on site to monitor the process during the day.
Okay, Kevin, what happens if there's a problem with the ballot? What kinds of problems might there be? So we're talking about a ballot that has little circles, right, that people are filling out. What can happen? What do people need to do, not do?
Well, I guess that's if you're referring to the if it's in the precinct, they're voting in person. If there's an issue with their ballot, it'll get kicked back out, and then you usually typically have one Republican, one Democrat inspector that will assist that voter if they can't figure out on their own what is wrong with it. Pretty much the two errors that we had in August was obviously cross-party voting, which you're not allowed to do, and then we had ambiguous marks, which was typically people didn't fill in the oval enough. So then if they can, depending on what the error is, they can fill in the ovals a little bit more, or if they will change, they can spoil their ballot and be issued a new ballot. Now, if you have it in the absentee counting board, if you have an error, you have to look at the inspectors will look at the error or look at the ballot when it gets kicked back out if it says either ambiguous marks or overvote or, and you have to look to see the intent of the voter. If it's clear where say they wanted to vote for one race and they say, nope, I don't, and they crossed it off and then voted for a different person, that is clear intent. But there's some that they just fill in all the ovals, or you can't tell, and then you just have to cast that ballot as is. And when you cast a ballot, the partisan, usually depending on what it is, that race or races, if it's a cross-party vote, the partisan section will not count, but the nonpartisan with proposals will typically count. So.
And you're doing this at home. Can you just do it with a red pen? Any
Nope.
old pen, pencil at your house? You're filling that out?
You want to use blue or black ink is what they recommend. And in the precinct, they do not want us to use gel pens. So, but that's usually, the pens are usually provided by in the precinct. So, but if you're bringing your own pen, do not bring a gel pen because they do not dry fast enough, and then it gets into the tabulator and smears the sensors, and then that's a whole nother issue.
All right, we kind of got to this a little bit before, but Kyle, can you go through who all will be watching the voting process?
So there are quite a few individuals that are involved in the monitoring the process. So in most precincts, you'll have poll watchers or challengers, and any member of the public can come into, every precinct will have a public area set up and designated. And so any citizen can come in and observe the process. And then there'll be poll watchers that are usually assigned by political parties. Challengers, which may come from different organizations or groups. So for instance, here in Saginaw County, we often have a statewide attorneys, or we'll have challengers dispatched to Saginaw County. The Michigan NAACP will have groups here, and the Michigan Republican Party and the Michigan Democratic Party will have challengers on site. We also will have local attorneys that will be present, and state attorneys in our area. The media often stops in to many of the polling locations. And then we also have election officials that will be visiting from the Michigan Secretary of State's office. They will drop in at polling locations from time to time here in Saginaw County. And then we have poll workers. And so those are your election workers. They're usually your neighbors. They're the people that live down the street. And so those are the people that are actually working the precinct. And so there'll be many of them involved in the process. And then after the election, the Board of Canvassers is involved in the process. And then they'll oversee the audit of the election process. And so we have many layers of auditing that happens after an election here in Michigan. So we have a statewide called risk limiting audit that we'll go through. And we also have random audits that are distributed by the Michigan Secretary of State, where we pick certain precincts in the county that we go out to and we audit those by hand manually. A lot of checks and balances here in Michigan.
Okay, and how can people help this election process go as smoothly as we can help? What can they do?
So we're always looking for volunteers, and I do call them volunteers because they do get paid, but they don't get paid nearly enough for the 14-hour day that they put in. So it depends on the jurisdiction. Each individual jurisdiction hires their own election workers, even though I train all the election workers for the entire county of Midland. So you should reach out to your local township or city clerk. You can fill out an application. So like our city clerk's office has their application right online. So you can certainly reach out, fill that out. We're always looking for new people. The average age of our election inspectors is about 62 to 65 here in Midland. So we will take anyone. They have to be at least 16, but we love to have school-age kids get involved. We love to have college kids get involved. And again, you do get paid. Some of my jurisdictions will allow you to work just a half a day if that's all you can get into your schedule. But again, you need to check with that local jurisdiction to find out, what their setup is. And then I actually have a link on my webpage that you can actually take my election inspector training right online. And then once you complete it, you send me some information, and then I go ahead and send you a certificate that you've been trained. So COVID times, you have to do special things. So, but we do have that available on our website.
Before I want to, can you do this all day, or can you do part day, all day?
It depends on the jurisdiction. Some of them do half day. Some of them you have to be there all day. So that's why you need to contact your jurisdiction.
Okay, so let me ask then the other clerks. Let's go, TJ. Can you do work all day at the polls, or can you do half days? How does that work?
Yep, so right now for our regular adult inspectors, I only offer all day just because I don't have enough. If I put that half day out there, everybody would want just a half day, and I'd have not enough people. If I ever get to that point, I would love it, because I do know there's a lot of folks out there that want to help, but it's a long day. And there's a lot you need to know and remember, and you only do it once every 2 years, or whatever the case may be. So right now our adult ones are only full-time or full day. We did reach out and work with ISD this past couple elections and got students that we did allow them to do a half day because we worked with their school and their credits and things like that. So that went over overwhelmingly wonderful. The voters love the kids. The kids have no fear of the computer. They don't know a day and age without it. So they're wonderful to have on that computer to check folks in. And we do allow a half day for them, but otherwise 18 and older is a full day.
Here in Saginaw County, we have a mixture. So we have clerks that have just full day shifts, and then we have the partial shifts. So we really encourage people to check with the municipality they're interested in working in. You don't have to work in the municipality that you live in, so you can work anywhere. We have people from other counties that come to Saginaw to work. Just really check in with the municipality that you're interested in working with, and I'm sure they'll try to accommodate your needs. We also have some that just come in for a few hours at the end of the night, and they're called a receiving board. And so we just use them at the end of the night, starting at about 8:30. They come in and they check all the materials in. And so that's another option of people that we need as well.
And Kevin?
I'm sorry. Ours is the same. We do shifts if needed. Most of our people work a full day. They want to work a full day. And we're always open to new people. Ours is a pretty good mix between younger and older crowd now, which is nice. We have some college students, and like TJ said, they're not afraid of the computer. That was one thing with some of the older workers. The computer is a little intimidating. So, but yeah. One thing I would like to go back and touch on, I see one of the chat questions. I mentioned cross-party voting. That only applies in the primary election in August. So in November, you can cross party lines. So I just wanted to clarify that before.
And to expand on that a little bit for with Kevin, the straight party or straight ticket, however they want to refer to that as, you can make a selection outside of that. So let's say 90% you do want to do a straight ticket one way or the other, but you have one race that you would like a different candidate in it. You can step outside. Everything else on your straight ticket will count, but that one race will override your straight ticket, if that makes sense.
Thank you. All right, so what happens, you know, Kyle, I'm hearing all this fear out there. Oh my gosh, we may not know the results of the election on midnight on November 3rd. And what's gonna happen in that case?
So here in Saginaw County and Bay and Midland as well, we've taken enormous steps. We've been planning for this large number of voters for over a year, several years. We've been anticipating this. And so we anticipate to have election results on election night. For us, it's going to be a busy night, but we're prepared to handle the increased volume of ballots that we'll receive. And so voters in this area should anticipate receiving their results at the normal time, maybe an hour or two after they normally do, but we're going to have results on election night. If something were to happen, we would continue to count votes. So we start at 7 o'clock in the morning in both those AV counting boards and in the precincts, and we will continuously be there, and we will continuously tabulate ballots until we've counted every last one of them. And so it won't, you know, come at midnight where we're going to take a break and come back the next day or something like that. We'll keep on going if it takes us, you know, 24 hours straight to count all the ballots. But I don't anticipate that here in this area. We've made significant investments in election equipment in all three of our counties. And so we have the election equipment and infrastructure that is needed to count these ballots on election day. And I think we all anticipate having election results. Now, it may be different in other states and in other counties because some counties here in Michigan have millions of residents, and it's going to take them a long time to count those ballots. And so we just have to be patient and know that those clerks are going to continue to count those ballots. The law does not allow you to stop here in Michigan. And so they will count those ballots until every one of them is counted. But it can, in some parts of our state, take, you know, longer than the 24 hours we have on election day. So we just need to be patient and wait for those results.
Anybody want to add anything to that? So basically, I hope people understand there's some confusion. I'll add something. There's some confusion out there between the idea of delay and fraud. Delay is not fraud. It's just, it might take a little bit longer, but that doesn't mean that the results are fraudulent. We just have to give it a little bit of time for the vote count to come in.
Yeah. And so it's going to take us a little bit longer. So for instance, in 2016's election, we sent out in our first absentee ballot mailing countywide, we sent out around 11,000 absentee ballots. And this time, our first one, we're going to mail out about 41 to 42,000 absentee ballots this upcoming week. And so that's a huge increase in participation. And we expect a lot of in-person voting as well. And so it's just going to take time. If there's a delay, it's not because that somebody's holding up the process. It's because we're continuing to work to count those ballots. And so it's not that we've stopped. There's going to be lots of people involved in the process. Most of the time, the longer we go, people don't leave, more people show up. And so we typically in Saginaw County in a presidential year will be still counting ballots at 3 o'clock in the morning. That's a normal time that we usually end. And we'll see from midnight to 3 o'clock at Saginaw City Hall, there's a big crowd that gathers of attorneys and all sorts of political people to be there to make sure that no fraud is happening. And so the more people who witness the process, in my opinion, the better. So come on out and observe the process if you think it's going away.
If I can add to that on our end, our biggest delay in August, let's say, because my AB County Board didn't start until 10 o'clock and they were done, I think they processed the last one by 9. The delay in our modem was the tapes that had to print because that took forever. So hopefully our county clerk switched the programming a little bit this time around to modem results prior to the tapes printing, or we'll have to cancel and do that first so that they can have that on their end. But our biggest delay in August was we received, I think, 250 to 300 ballots on election day after 5 p.m. So folks that are waiting, and they do have until 8 p.m. to bring them back, which is wonderful, but those also have to be checked in and signature verified and everything before I can take them to the counting board. So those delays aren't necessarily anybody's fault. It's just that it still takes the same process. And this time we'll obviously start a little sooner because our volume would be up a little bit from August, but we have such a streamlined process and team up there that the process itself goes relatively quickly. And then we'll have fewer machine beeps this time because of the crossover issues in August. So we expect a smooth day, but yeah, those delays sometimes are just, there's nothing that can help that process because voters have until 8 to return them. So we need to account for that and be able to process them.
Another thing that I'd like to touch on is in Saginaw and Midland counties, we use an interactive election map that reports the results. And so you might see some of our results go on very quickly onto that map here in Saginaw County. For instance, some very small jurisdictions like Marion Township might have their results on there at 8:15. And so just 15 minutes after a poll closed, you might have 100% of the results for one small township. And then people often wonder, why don't we have results for the city of Saginaw that, you're going to have thousands and thousands of ballots that you're processing there. And so that may take us until 2 o'clock. And so in the morning. And so there's that gap, but we find it to be, we want to put the information out as soon as we have it. So as soon as we have Marion Township's information at 8:15, it goes out on the website so everybody can see it. And as soon as we have the city of Saginaw's, we'll put that out there as well. But there is a delay in receiving those. But that interactive map is the instant that we receive it here at the county building, it is instantly put out on that map. And so it's a pretty neat feature that we have.
Yep, it's electionreporting.com.
Yep.
Go to that website and you can see Saginaw and Midland's results.
Yeah, you can see, and it's a lot of our neighboring counties in this area are using it as well. And so I believe now we have Isabella County on it and Shiawassee County. So it's a real good resource to go and see the region and what's happening in our area.
Fantastic. Okay, so we're kind of winding down here, I think, through the process. I just want to say a couple of words about vote suppression. We haven't seen much of that here in Michigan. One of the ways we did see it, there was a robocall that went out from some guys who were claiming to track people who mailed in an absentee voter for mandatory vaccines. So that's a case where if somebody calls you and they're telling you that you're going to be tracked or you shouldn't vote for any reason, don't pay attention to the call. I mean, most people are screening their calls anyway these days in terms of when they don't know the number. So just be very careful about people who are calling you to tell you that you shouldn't vote for some reason. Just try and not, you can forward those calls on. And people can be prosecuted for them, but there shouldn't be people calling you and telling you not to vote. In terms of, you also shouldn't have people who are offering to help you with your ballot. I mean, if you don't normally need help with your ballot, you don't need to give that to somebody else to do that. That's one of the areas that we've seen campaign fraud in the United States. It wasn't voter fraud, it was a campaign in a particular state that claimed to be helping people, but really was manipulating a ballot. So just be careful of that. Turn your own ballot in, vote yourself. Just a couple of words in that respect. There's just to say also that the scholarly findings about voting by mail are very positive. It really increases voter turnout in the states that have had it. So that's a really nice thing to see. There's no evidence that voting by mail helps one party more than the other. So everybody can really benefit from this, from voting by mail. And even if it takes us a little bit longer, I think it probably is worth it. There's been very little fraud, and I want to point to one study from Washington State in 2016. Washington State is one of the states that's been had mail-in voting for a long time. And out of all of their mail-in voting, they had 75 cases of possible fraud. When they went through it, the vast majority of those were legitimate voters. It was an error on the state's part, so that people were not attempting to vote fraudulently. It was few cases of spouses who thought that they could vote for a deceased loved one, few cases of people who had homes in different states thinking they could vote in both states. So out of all of those 75 possible cases, they only found 10 people who had voted 2 times, and they just warned them that if they did that, they would be prosecuted. So we already talked about that in this state. There are more penalties here, and so we want to remind you of that. But it just suggests that the very low possibility of any kind of fraud. It's very rare. So, you know, there's the one other thing I would say, and that sort of gets back to the origin of this whole presentation, is just to think, you know, look to big news organizations for your information about politics. Most of the big ones are very good. Be careful about social media as your sole source of information about politics. I know, unfortunately, particularly younger people that's where a lot of people are getting most of their information about their news, is on social media. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because people can post good news sources on social media. It becomes a problem when people are using memes and they are using sort of folksy little articles and maybe a couple paragraphs of indeterminate origin. And those are not really news sources. You want to fact check those news sources with the big news organizations that do the fact checking. So that is a global way in which you can have vote suppression. So make sure that you're going to the big news organizations to look at those, verify those kinds of stories. So I think that does it for today. I don't know if you guys want to add anything to that from what I'm saying there. Okay, well, I really want to thank the clerks, all of them, for joining me today. I think you've done a wonderful job, and I know that this will be a terrific resource for people in this region. And we have recorded this, and we're going to make this available at the center. And now I want to take some time and turn over and take a look at what the questions are for us. I'll probably be directing those to the clerks the most. If I can see that. Okay. So I'm not seeing, Riley, are you seeing many questions? I'm not seeing any.
No, but if folks do have some, now's the time to ask. I actually have a question, if that's okay.
Yeah, wonderful.
And this is for Kevin. Kevin, this is something you and I have worked on this past year, but for our students on the call, or those that'll watch after the fact, we got into a situation where they wanted to vote on election day, and they happened to be registered back home, but they wanted to vote in Kochville Township in person. And so we were encountering having to provide a proof of residency. And I just wanted to see if you wanted to talk about that at all, and maybe have some advice for student voters in terms of checking their registration ahead of time and being prepared.
Yeah, we did have in March, we had about a dozen college kids, and then we were trying to verify their address with some of the requirements, either the driver's license or a state document or government document. The others kind of slipped my mind at the moment. But yeah, if you can, try to get registered. If you think you're going to be in Kochville and want to vote in Kochville, get to the clerk's office if you can prior to election day. Hopefully we're not going to be as busy as some of the other jurisdictions in the bigger cities that I heard nightmares about from March. And I'm not sure on August. But yeah. But yeah, you need to register in person with my office, the Kochville clerk, or if you're living in Bay City, or so. Anything else?
I don't know if anybody has anything else to add, but I'll just say that in the chat, I posted a link to our website, which has my contact information. If you're an SVSU student and you have questions about this, you'll see us on campus ahead of Election Day, leading up to Election Day. We're a nonpartisan organization, and it's all about helping you register to vote. So, but michigan.gov/student voting is a web platform right now that has a ton of resources that's linked on our website. And there's really a step-by-step guide for students specifically on there on registering and ultimately getting to the poll.
And I guess I'd like to add with the college students, you have the right to vote either back home, or like you said, you can come in on election day and register here and vote in person if you feel that. But we try to encourage absentee voting with college students, because you don't know from year to year where your address is going to be. And also with, when you register in person at the clerk's office, it prompts a change in your driver's license at the Secretary of State. So they will send you a sticker. So that's going to be your place of residence. So, but if you're moving back home in the summer, but either way, but we try to explain the absentee process the best we can and encourage that. But you are certainly more than welcome to vote in person and register. So, but if you have any questions, don't hesitate to call up my office or any of the other clerk's offices. So
Yeah, and that's just what I wanted to add. I mean, I think 80% of our day is answering questions at this point because of spins that the media is putting out. And I would much rather do that than to have someone shy away from voting because they don't know what to believe. So definitely call with any questions. We are more than happy to walk you through it and assist the best way that we can. We just really want everyone that wants to vote. And that's the most important part. So, we don't share that information with anybody. We just assist you with helping you fill out your ballot or telling you where to go on election day. We answer questions for many jurisdictions. It's, the clerk community is wonderful at coming together and helping people out. So even if you're not one of my residents or one of the other, residents of the other clerks, I am sure anybody will assist you in getting you in the right place to go. So don't hesitate to ask those questions.
Fantastic. I don't see any other questions. Do you, Riley? Okay, that's okay. And so we're all of us here as resources for people who watch this presentation later and have questions. To feel free to reach out to any of us and we can help you get in touch with the right folks and get you through this process. We just really want, I know all of us to have democracy work. We really take a lot of pride in that and enjoy that process. So all of you, thank you again so much for participating and good luck this season. I know it's going to be exciting.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Jesse.
Welcome. Bye-bye, guys.